ESPN 1410 Wing AM brings you 1410 Wing Live. Follow along on Facebook, on Twitter, even on our ESPN Dayton YouTube channel, and at wingam.com. We're everywhere. The biggest interviews with the biggest local and national guests. It's 1410 Wing Live with Justin Kinner.
All right, everybody, welcome in. It's the Justin Kinner Show with Kev Nash live here on Dayton's ESPN radio station, 1410 Wing AM. And today's the big day, finally. I feel like we've been waiting for this moment for Obi Toppin and the Dayton Flyers for quite some time. I mean, as great as that Dayton Flyers squad was last season, it just seems like everything that could have been unfair to happen to them happened. Not just to them, but to everybody, of course.
Right.
But, not getting to play the NCAA tournament, the draft continued to be pushed back. It's going to be done remotely tonight, so we won't really get to see Obi walk up on stage, put the hat on, shake Commissioner Silver's hand, and all that. But it's going to be awesome to be able to hear Obi Toppin's name called tonight. But Kev, I'm excited to talk NBA draft and excited to bring on our next guest. We have ESPN Radio's Jorge Sedano joining us. George, welcome in, sir. How are you?
I'm great, guys. Thanks for having me. Hope you guys are healthy, safe, and sound.
Thank you.
It's the name of the game right now. But here we are. This is obviously a very unique NBA draft at this point because of how late in the year we're having it. But it's not that's not why it's unique to me. It's unique to me because free agency is happening right now, as is the draft, and then the season is a month away. So the cool part is we've had to wait a long time to hear Obi Toppin's name be heard in the NBA draft, but we're not going to have to wait long for us Dayton fans here in the area to get to watch him out on the floor in the NBA as the season's just over a month away.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. And look, the kid is just fantastic to watch, right? Like, he burst on the scene. Like, look, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't really start paying attention to guys or even the college basketball season until these early tournaments, right? And he kind of caught my attention in Maui, right, where he was just phenomenal. He had a great first game against Anthony Edwards, interestingly enough. He outscored him there, had a big game against Virginia Tech after that. And then even though they lost that game to Kansas in overtime, like that game, I think really put him on the national spotlight, right? Where a lot of people were like, whoa, who is this kid? So with a lot of eyes on the Maui Invitational, he really took that by storm. And a lot of people started to notice how good this kid is. And it's not just the freakish athleticism that I think he has and his great scoring ability and his ability just to get to the rack. But you could see now, as you kind of talk to people about his game and his development, how good he's become as a well-rounded player, particularly offensively. Taking 2-3 pointers a game, hitting 39%. Those numbers will only continue to rise. And his story is just fantastic. Like, he is a kid who just eats, breathes, and sleeps basketball.
I wanted to ask.
Talk player comps.
Go ahead.
Go, Kev. We talk player comps all the time. What? Me or you? I'm going.
You.
Player comps all the time. We've talked about Amari Stoudemire, Kenyon Martin, as far as some previous players. Who are some of the players in the game today that you look at and say, oh, that's who his game resembles. That's who I anticipate him looking like in the game, which, again, the NBA season starts a month from now.
It's not a perfect comp, but I think Aaron Gordon makes some sense, right, in regards to the size, the build, the body, the ability to have that explosiveness around the rim, right? And Aaron has developed a three-point shot. Now, he didn't have that coming out of college, but obviously the game was a little different when he first came out. I mean, he had just kind of come into a league that had just started to kind of be revolutionized by the three-point shot. Toppin is a little bit ahead of the game and ahead of the curve in that regard. But yeah, I think the Kenyon Martin comp is actually a perfect comp if Kenyon Martin can shoot threes, right? Which late in his career, he took a few more. But I just think that's a skill that, as long as the shot isn't broken, that the form is okay, and it seems that's the case with Toppin, that's something that will develop, right? And all you have to be is serviceable from there in regards to being a guy who plays on the wing or even in his case, more in the front court, right? Like, he's a small ball 5, right? He's a 4 in this league. He's not really a 3. Maybe he was a 3 10 years ago, but now he's a 4 or a 5. And just the ability to be live from out there is so important. And just his first step is so good. And his ability to just finish is so good that I think people, as long as they have to respect him from out there, that makes a lot of sense. Now, could he be the passer that Gordon has become? To me, that's kind of the next development as far as Toppin is concerned. Can he be that? And if he can get there, then maybe the Aaron Gordon comp is probably the most accurate potentially.
All of us here in Ohio selfishly want him to go to the Cavs, but, fit-wise, where do you see him having the best fit?
I mean, I think the Cavs make some sense, right? Like, I don't think Kevin Love is going to be there forever. So I think that they could use someone at the 4. And I think having the ability to learn from someone like Kevin Love would be fantastic for him. So I like the fit there. Plus, I like some of their young guys. Like, I think Colin Sexton, I don't think he's a starter per se. Look, he's got the ability to be a starter, but I think his best fit is probably a supreme elite sixth man. I love Darius Garland to kind of space the floor for someone like Toppin getting to the rack. I think Cleveland makes a lot of sense. I know the Knicks are interested in him. They're at 8 right now. So if he falls to 8, I can see that. There is talk that maybe the Knicks even jump up potentially from 8. I know he's a Brooklyn native. The kid grew up in New York. He spent some time in Florida, but obviously the family is from New York. So I think that makes some sense for them there too. They'd love a hometown kid. And his skill set, I think it fits better with Cleveland because they've got better shooting around him. I don't think the Knicks have the shooting that would help unlock his game. But I still think the Knicks, much like the Cavs, are a work in progress. That roster, what it is now, is not what it's going to be in a year, or certainly not in 2 or 3 years.
What's the highest you project again, everyone always has the projections in their mock drafts, but what's the highest based on the teams that are in this order right now and for where he would make sense? What's the highest you could see him be picked, and what's the furthest you could see him drop, in your opinion?
I think the Cavs is probably the ceiling. Could he drop past the Knicks? Probably. But again, I would be surprised if he dropped past 8, which is where the Knicks are currently. That would be somewhat of a surprise for me.
I want to ask you about James Harden and this whole $100 million contract that he turned down. What's up with that?
It wouldn't be what I would have advised him. Look, I look at it this way, and Giannis Antetokounmpo is kind of in this same situation, right? Where regardless of who you are in this sport, and those guys have made a lot of money, and particularly James has made a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
But you could always make more. You could set up your family for generations, okay,
Yeah.
with this kind of money. And it's not football, right, where injuries are as big a deal, but there's still significant injuries, and guys can be injured and not be the same players. Like, we've seen that plenty of times, and especially and James has been relatively healthy. I don't think there's any doubt. I mean, he's built like, a rock in a lot of ways. So, but it can happen to anybody. So I'm always of the school of take the money, and if you still want to leave, there's still options for you to leave, because the longer you're extended, the more valuable your contract is to your current team to trade. So it actually is beneficial for the Rockets had he signed that. And I thought it would have been beneficial for James. But it seems fairly obvious that he doesn't want to be in Houston and that Russ doesn't want to be in Houston. They just don't have the leverage right now because they're under contract for several more years, the minimum of 2, perhaps even 3, because they have an opt-out. And while that helps the Rockets, it doesn't help those guys, because look at what Drew Holiday just went for. Drew Holiday is a very good player, okay? He's a one-time All-Star. He got a similar haul to what Paul George got, who's a 6-time All-Star. So if I'm James Harden or the Rockets at this point, if I'm Harden, I'm like, man, that's not great for me. But if I'm the Rockets, I'm like, that's great for us, because that means that is absolutely the floor. And clearly you would think it would have to be more than that for a guy who has been an MVP in this league. So, yeah, I just think that changed the dynamics, certainly, that Drew Holiday deal. Milwaukee's desperation really kind of hurt James Harden potentially.
You talked about Russ. I hear so many rumors. Maybe he's going to team up with Jordan, with the Charlotte Hornets. Maybe he's going to go to the Knicks. I've even heard the Cavs may get into the mix. Where do you see a landing spot for Russ?
Well, it's fascinating because I thought Russ would want to be in a contender, but the word is that that's not necessarily the case, that he wants to go back to his old role of him being the captain of the ship, right? And being in control. And if that's going to be the case, that's not going to happen on any of the current contenders that could probably use him, right? Whether it's the LA teams or, not Milwaukee anymore because they got Holiday now. But so the Hornets, the Knicks, I hadn't heard the Cavs, but, that could make some sense. But those teams would be ideal for him if that's the role that he wants. And again, it's about these guys wanting to be happy. I would be a guy who would want to win. But I think Russ also is a different breed, a different dude, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not telling him he should think the way I think. But I was a little surprised that was the tack that he took. But if that's indeed the case, then those are the teams that he's going to have to be eyeing. Maybe I guess if I had to look, and I don't know the cap space off the top of my head, I'd have to kind of look at it real quick. But, there are other teams like maybe San Antonio, right, could be in that mix where they're at least a borderline playoff team, right? And they could use some star power, though they have DeJounte Murray. Do they want to get out of something like that? Or do they want to play them together, right? Because Russ isn't a great defender even at this stage of his career. And they've got some other young players there too, where I would imagine Lonnie Walker, the fourth. But, in today's NBA, you could play all three of those guys together, to be honest with you. So, maybe someone like San Antonio would be interested in Russ. But again, that's just me randomly speculating. But that would at least give him an opportunity to potentially be on a team that could break into the playoff picture.
We have ESPN Radio's Jorge Sedano with us from 710 ESPN Los Angeles, talking NBA free agency, NBA draft. George, as we let you go here too, just, what we just watched this last season just wrap up, a very long season, of course, with that big delay here in the middle due to COVID. But LeBron James wins wins another championship with a third different team now. LeBron, one of the best of all time. I'm just curious, in your opinion, has he won his last NBA championship, or is there still how big is this window still for him and this Lakers team moving forward when you got a team like the Nets who are eyeing adding Harden or whoever, just trying to, they're trying to create these teams around the league to go right back at LeBron, which is basically how the Warriors started too, to go at LeBron. So how do you see his career ending? Does he get another NBA title?
Yeah, I think it's possible. I mean, Anthony Davis is 27 years old, and he's an extraterrestrial. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like, there are few players in the sport that have the skill set that he has. And LeBron proved last year that he's still the best player in the game, right? So I think that could continue to be the case this upcoming season. I think that at the very least, you're still looking at a top 3 player in the NBA. So, but I wouldn't bet against him being the best player still from a skill set perspective. I just think that he's going to be, probably a little smarter about his body this particular season. Not that he's not smart in general, but I think he's going to be even more careful potentially this season with the quick turnaround of 72 days potentially between the end of the NBA Finals and the start of the season. But yeah, I thought last season was unbelievably important for him to win a championship because of the stuff you mentioned. The Warriors will be back. The Brooklyn Nets are going to be in the fold. And teams are going to get better, particularly in the East, right? Boston is going to be a year older and better. The Miami Heat are going to be better and a year older, with Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero, such young players that they have. The Toronto Raptors are always going to be really good. There are going to be teams in the East to compete against. And look, I still think Philly, despite the fact that they have underachieved here recently, I think are a team that has a high ceiling. So there's a lot of teams that are going to be in that championship caliber mix, including obviously the Clippers in Los Angeles as well. So there's a lot of teams that they're going to have to compete against. And I think that they'll have more experience, better chemistry together. So it will be more challenging, but I'm not betting against LeBron. And I'm certainly not betting against what we've seen from Anthony Davis, because I do think that despite the fact that I think Dwayne Wade is the most accomplished player LeBron has ever played with, Anthony Davis is probably the best fit as far as on-court chemistry in regards to just having a guy that can really make up for, I don't want to call them deficiencies, but, the aspects of the game where LeBron doesn't need to focus on as much, right? Like, he can kind of let Anthony take on a bigger role in regards to certain things, anchoring the defense, right? Finishing around the rim, and just kind of playing his game and letting him kind of be the guy that steps forward and being maybe the leading scorer like he was last year. That could continue. And just really being the anchor of what they do on a regular basis, whereas LeBron can pick and choose his spots better, right? Whether that's in the regular season or certainly in the playoffs, we know he's going to pick and choose his spots to really, impart his wisdom and just kind of his prowess onto the game. So I think that's just kind of the way I look at the way that those two guys will handle themselves. And I still think that they're the favorite heading into this thing.
You brought up the Clippers. How was things out in LA after they blew that lead against the Nuggets?
The jokes are flying, man. That's for sure. They called poor Paul George Pandemic P or, all that stuff. And, it'll be fascinating to see what this team looks like moving forward. There probably will be some changes on the margins. I don't see any changes with Paul George and Kawhi. But, yeah, look, they were a team that I felt like could beat the Lakers, but they kind of forgot that you have to get to the Lakers, right? And they only played 12 games with their entire group healthy. Now, they were 11-1 or 10-2, I believe, in those games. But they kind of cheated the process a little bit. And some of that was not their fault. Some of it was COVID. Some of it was injuries. Some of it was added injuries. Some of it was rehabilitation, right? But some of it was on them, too. And I think that's why you saw the changes you saw on the coaching ranks with Doc Rivers and now bringing in Ty Lue, because they want perhaps, and again, this isn't a knock on Doc because Doc is a player's coach, but they want maybe a different level of accountability amongst the group of players, and they maybe feel that Ty Lue could implement something like that.
All right, ESPN Radio's Jorge Sedano from 710 ESPN Los Angeles. Good enough to hang out with us here this afternoon on the Justin Kidder Show with Kevin Nash. The NBA draft tonight, 8 o'clock, 7:30 coverage starts. Of course, make sure, Dayton fans, you tune in and listen all night long again to hear Obi Toppin's name be called. George, send us out with this. The number one overall pick is going to be who? And on a scale of 1 to 10, how high would you, on a scale of 1 to 10, the likelihood of Obi somehow being the number one pick tonight is what?
Okay, I think it's going to be Anthony Edwards. I think he's the best fit in Minnesota with D'Angelo Russell and Karl Anthony Towns. A wing player to play with a point guard and a big man just makes way too much sense. And honestly, I just think that he's the best player, the best talent in this particular draft. Obi Toppin being number one, 10 being the most, 1 being the least. Is that
yes.
is that the way? Yeah, yes. I mean, I would say
it's all
1.
good. I put you on the spot. That's all.
I would say a 1. I would say a 1. I don't think he's going to be the number one pick in the draft.
All right, you heard it. He said 1. He's going number 1. That's what I heard.
Yeah,
now.
I'm not an absolutist. So I could have gone 0, to be honest with you, and gone off the board, but I will at least give some wiggle room. So I'll say a 1. Not that he's going 1. But a 1 that from 1 to 10 that he actually goes number 1.
Fair enough. We're just excited in this area to be hearing a Dayton Flyers name be called, especially this high in the draft. All right, ESPN Radio's Jorge Sedano, 710 ESPN Los Angeles. George, thank you so much for your time. Take care. Stay healthy.
All right, man. You guys too. Take care. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, man.